Friday. And I think we can start with our next webinar. This Friday, a bit of shift of roles from the usual. Usually we have our Klas Pettersen, CEO of NORA, that is leading these webinars. But this Friday, it's a bit of a specific situation. He's going to be a webinar speaker. So I'll start by presenting Klas first, and then presenting the topic. So Klas is, as I said, the CEO of NORA, the Norwegian Artificial Intelligence Research Consortium. He is originally a civil engineer in physics, quantum mechanics from the NTNU University, with a PhD in computational neuroscience from the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, which he acquired in 2007. After receiving his PhD, he has been working as a postdoctoral researcher and a research scientist at NMBU in the group of computational biology, and later also at the Center for Integrative Genetics. From 2014, he worked at the Center for Institute of Basic Medical Sciences at University of Oslo, and also as a visiting scholar at University of California in San Diego. He has also worked as a consultant for Accenture. So this is really short of Klas's CV. So Klas, today your topic is artificial intelligence in healthcare, a Norwegian gold mine. I will not go into details about the topic. I will just say that the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ivan. Thank you for the kind introduction. And thank you to NORA for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today. Artificial intelligence in healthcare, a Norwegian gold mine. So that's the question we're going to ask and maybe answer today. The outline of the talk, I'll talk a little bit about the AI history, AI and medical research, and I will talk about deep medicine. And then I will also talk a little bit about NORA and healthcare. So let's start with the history. Many of you probably know this, but artificial intelligence is nothing new. We could go back all the way to, I guess, the 12th century or something, or maybe even before, when people started talking about intelligence outside the human in a machine. But the start, many tend to start that at this famous paper from Turing, Computing, Machinery and Intelligence, where he proposed the question, can machines think? So this was done already in 1950. And in the 50s, the term artificial intelligence was coined in this famous Dartmouth conference. And here you see the picture of the founding fathers of artificial intelligence. I will also point to one thing I think is particularly interesting. Is Frank Rosenblatt. He invented what he called the perceptron in 1958. And the inspiration for this perceptron is the brain. It's a neuron. So already before this, McCulloch and Pitts had a model of how a single neuron, a brain cell, works. And quite basically, simply, it works by summing up input. So a neuron sums up input into its dendrites, and if the sum is large enough, it sends a signal further on. And the perceptron, and also modern artificial intelligence, I'm now talking about deep learning, the deep neural networks, they have kind of the same structure. So in principle, they sum up input from other artificial neurons and passes this input on in a non-linear way. So that's kind of the short history. And already in the 1950s, this was quite the hype. So here is from the New York Times, where they write, the Navy revealed the embryo of an electronic computer today that it expects will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious of its existence. So this was in the 1950s. And as you all know, this has not happened. It has not happened at all. Rather, it has been some cold winter. This term, artificial intelligence, was hyped back in those days. And that kind of led to restricted resources. So we had what we call the artificial intelligence winters. So why is this not a winter? Why are we in different times this time? So here is the question then. Will artificial intelligence change healthcare? Is it hyped? Or will it kind of work this time? And I think I've written this piece also last year in Tidsskriftet for Norsk Legeforening, which kind of states that it will change healthcare. So the answer, I think, is yes, and it's happening now. So we can ask, what's different this time? Why is this not a hype? Why no? And I think the answer here is quite simple. It is actually, we have all these tools now. It's working. So as an illustration, the article I wrote was in Norwegian, but you could easily translate this through Google Translate, which is an artificial intelligence. And the translation is not perfect, but it's actually quite good and it works. So why does it work this time? Here are some of the success factors of deep learning. It's mainly three factors. It's data. We have enormous amounts of data. I will illustrate this quite soon. It's also the algorithms and the knowledge. They have also improved. And not the least, it's the compute. We have much better machinery this time. So just to illustrate, I will illustrate these points also from my own research. So here is, if I can start this movie, let's see. Yeah, so here you can see from my own research some experiments. This is done at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Oslo. What you see there to the left is a mouse sleeping. And the study is a sleep study. And we have this very nice techniques there where you can image activity. Look at the green now. That's the activity in a certain type of brain cells called astrocytes. And if you can see, look at the mouse and something will soon happen. It will start to wake. And what you will see now, quite soon, I think, is there you see some green activity, right? And after the activity, the mouse wakes up. And this was a study we did at the Faculty of Medicine. But what is exceptional and quite special with this study is compared to earlier times, at least, not compared to other studies, but it's the amount of data. We imaged this mouse for hours and hours and hours and different mice as well. And it was gathered around 50 terabytes of data for this one research project. So how much is that really? I think we should try to think how much this really is, because it's easy to just see the numbers and the terabytes. But what does that mean? When I grew up, we had this old Commodore floppy disks. This took less than 1 megabyte, 170 kilobytes actually. And that's actually 50 terabytes. That makes 300 million of those. It's enormous amounts of data. And if you think that this floppy disk is about 1.6 millimeter thick, so if you pile them on top of each other, that would be 470 kilometers of floppy disks. That's the distance from the NORA office and up in Oslo and up to the NAIL office in Trondheim. So that's quite some distance. We have huge amounts of data now. And this has happened since the 50s. So this 50 terabytes of data, I have also to say that this went into a good journal. And actually 2 weeks ago, I also have to mention, because Rune and Laura and Daniel especially has done a great job, and it was actually the front page of VG. So we even made it into VG. That has to be kind of the top scientific achievement. So great job by that lab. So this is the big data thing. We are gathering enormous amounts of data now, both in experiments and research, but also in healthcare in general. I will go to the next point, which was algorithms. Close to my heart is kind of the inspiration from the brain. So I will talk a little bit about AI and neuroscience and what I call a virtuous circle. So we do imaging from the mouse brain, as you saw. And in these experiments, to the right there, we see some patterns. And this is called ripples. These ripples, they appear when you sleep, and they are shown to be connected to learning. So actually, in Norway, we have, neuroscience has a quite good community. We even have Nobel Prizes in Norway. May-Britt and Edvard Moser some years ago. And what they, among other things, have shown is how kind of the mouse can navigate, or rats can navigate. And in the brain, you have certain cells that can show exactly where you are in a room or in a maze or whatever. So if you learn how to walk in your house, that kind of tour around the house will have a specific patterns in the neurons. You will see pattern and where you are in the neurons by kind of watching the patterns of how the activity is in your brain. This type of patterns, they are actually replayed when you sleep. So that's quite interesting. And why I mention it, we have studied this also. We actually used deep neural networks, artificial intelligence to find this pattern in the data. But the exciting thing is that this can also teach us something about how learning works in the brain. And specifically this replay phenomenon. It has been shown that this is also in human, not only in mice. And it has also shown some functions. And the interesting part is that when you record this from the brain, you use actually AI to find the patterns like we did. Then you get a better understanding of the learning process and the replay. And this has now lately been used and applied to improve AI. So this kind of inspiration from the brain is what I call a virtuous circle. And the deep neural networks, they are inspired by the brain in many ways. The deep networks and the neurons are also inspired by the brain. And how they typically work is that you have an image, for example, which is basically only a huge pile of numbers. And then they have signal processing through these layers. Like the brain has layers, you have layers of information processing in the deep artificial neural network. And what you end up and what you would like to end up with at the end is to classify this image, whether it's a bird or a dog or a cat or whatever. And through a learning process, this network it could be really good at this, and this is used also in medicine then. Typically could classify whether an image has cancer or not. And this is through a learning process, and which has also, in some sense, been inspired by the brain. And it has happened quite a lot just since 2012. In 2012, we had this huge leap, I think, when it comes to image recognition. It is this yearly contest, which is the ImageNet contest, which AlexNet won in 2012. And then they used a deep neural network of 8 layers. And what specifically they did was to show how they could distribute the computing and use the GPUs, the graphic cards in the computers. They could parallelize this. And when you run this in parallel, you could do you could do incredibly much more in a short time to make these networks learn them. And this was in 2012, and it was kind of a huge leap compared to the second best algorithm. And 8 layers, it was quite deep. And already in 2015, this reached kind of human level understanding of images. So, and then it had gone from 8 layers to 152 layers. Another type of network though, the Microsoft ResNet. But this is happening now. This is not very long ago. It's just 5 years ago. So this is the algorithms, the kind of how deep the networks are, how much information you can process, and not the least all these new processors then. And when they started using the GPUs, they also saw that they can develop new types of processors. So you have a lot of new computer chips coming out that are specially tailored to as AI accelerators to accelerate the process. So these 3 things are happening now, and this is kind of the huge difference to earlier times, to the 50s and 60s and so on. And in medicine, you see also that this has been used a lot lately, these deep networks. So if you look up on PubMed machine learning, for example, you'll see that it kind of explodes after about 2015. So a lot of people in medical research use machine learning, use deep learning, that has also exploded in the past years only. I would very much like to, if you're interested in this topic, to recommend this book. It's called Deep Medicine by Erik Topol. And by the way, if you're on Twitter, you should really follow Erik Topol. I think that's my best source of information when it comes to AI and healthcare. So he has written this very good book, and also for researchers, it's a shorter review article that you could read in 2019. So I will show you now some examples of deep learning in medicine. I will just go fast through, and these examples are also from Erik Topol. So many of his tweets contains papers. He tweets it out almost immediately after they are out, so it's a perfect source of information. Here you have Nature Medicine, year in review, and notable advances in 2019, where they say machines match humans in image-based diagnosis. So this is a systematic review and meta-analysis of 68 such studies, where the conclusion is that machines match humans in image-based diagnosis. The December edition of Nature in 2019 was completely about, the focus was on deep learning in microscopy. Of course, microscopy is also images. So this is also a very interesting research field, of course. You have some nice papers. This is from JAMA Cardiology, where they say, actually by face recognition, you could detect your pulse, and you could even diagnose atrial fibrillation. So this kind of also raises, of course, quite a few ethical concerns. Here is expert level detection of acute intracranial hemorrhage on head computed tomography using deep learning. Here is another one from Nature Machine Intelligence, automated abnormality detection in lower extremity radiographs using deep learning. As you see, a lot of examples. Here is not images, this is actually text. Precision screening for familiar hypercholesterolemia, a machine learning study applied to electronic health encounter data. So by reading health records, you could get a diagnosis and a probability of having this familiar hypercholesterolemia. Here is from Nature Methods, and this predicts the stability of natural and de novo designed proteins. So protein folding, stability of proteins. This is also then used to pick dates for medicines, vaccines, whatever. Here also, not only do we have images in hospitals or in healthcare, but we also have a lot of other phenotypes that could be measured. So here they show kind of principles for how to do this. A system approach to clinical oncology uses deep phenotyping to deliver personalized care. So combined with your, combined with radiology, you could use other phenotype data, and that could give you medicines that work specifically for you, precision medicine, personalized medicine. Discrimination of the behavioral dynamics of visually impaired infants via deep learning. I guess you get the picture. A lot of things are happening in the research community, or a lot of good results have been coming out the last years. Here is in breast cancer screening, and here is Nature article, international evaluation of an AI system for breast cancer screening as well. You also have a lot of groups in Norway, actually all the universities in Norway and many of the big research institutes do artificial intelligence in healthcare. Here is an example from University of Tromsø to the left, and also to the right, the Do More project, which also had the front page of Aftenposten actually, Håvard Danielsen there. So a lot is happening. Another thing, it's not only what is happening in the research community when you think about images and text analysis, but we also have a lot of new recordings. And mobile devices and health is also kind of important. Here is the front page of Apple right now. The future of health is on your wrist. So you see now that all the big tech companies are going into the health industry. You have a lot of new sensor technology. Yeah. And this can then be integrated, all the sensor technology with all the other information. And in the center of this is artificial intelligence and machine learning. So kind of that's where we are now. A lot of good research results, a lot of also of optimism, but then is this ready for market? And this is quite new. This is, as you all understand, the field is new in itself, but and I think 2018 was the first time that artificial intelligence algorithm was approved by the FDA as a diagnostic tool in healthcare. So that was diabetic retinopathy, a certain type of blindness that you can get from diabetes, and which previously or still in most clinics, you need experts to diagnose that. But now you could actually take an image of your retina and by artificial intelligence can do the diagnosis. And this actually not only is good for the patients at the clinic, but this also kind of democratize healthcare in a sense. Now you can do this almost anywhere. You don't have to go into an expert in New York or wherever. You could do this on the countryside, in a rural district. So this is new. It's also how to kind of go through the systems, the FDA or the EU system to get approved is also quite new and fresh. And in Norway, I now want to spend the last minutes on Norway and healthcare in Norway. We have some good documents. Here's stortingsmelding on helsenæringen, the health industry. I also have, of course, the national strategy on artificial intelligence, and also a very interesting white paper on artificial intelligence in healthcare from Direktoratet for e-helse. So that's kind of some good background documents within this field. And what they point at typically is that Norway is very good when it comes to data. We have a lot of really great registry data. They could even also, in principle at least, be coupled to, we have social security numbers. And many of these registers are more or less complete back to, like the cancer registry, back to the mid-50s, I think, covering the whole population. So this is quite exceptional, the data we have. And what we see now is that a lot of work is now going into getting this data more easily accessible for research, and also later on for industry. So this is the health analysis platform, Helseanalyseplattformen. So this is, has been started, and they will kind of stepwise get new functions, but the idea is that all the data sources and registry data in Norway will be more easily accessible for research and development. And if you look at this white paper from Direktoratet for e-helse, what their conclusion is that they encourage a closer collaboration between academia, industry, and units in the public sector to create a good, fast, and robust development in the field. So that's kind of how they conclude. And this is what NORA also wants to do. So how to proceed here? The same white paper sketches out how to proceed. You have to kind of get an environment, an ecosystem for this, where you combine the research community, innovation communities, industry, and also the health trusts. So what they write is the development and implementation of the technology requires collaboration across different competence groups, such as clinicians, computer scientists, and lawyers. In addition, there is a need for access to real data that only the health trusts have access to. So this collaboration is important. And this is also what NORA now has done. We have an interest for the Digital Innovation Hub program. So we have written a letter of interest to Innovation Norge about making this ecosystem. So what we will try to do there is to, we will kind of collaborate with all these 5 parts that you see in the sketch here. We will try to get an ecosystem with innovators and entrepreneurs, research community, the public sector, corporates, and investors. And in this project, and we have applied as an AI network. So AI is what we are doing in NORA, but health will be prioritized. And we have quite a lot of partners in these projects, more than 70 partners. That's all the universities and research institutes of NORA. And in addition to that, Norway Health Tech, Oslo Cancer Cluster, Helse Sør-Øst, hospitals, several incubators, Startup Lab, Gründergarasjen, Salip, Microsoft Norge is also there, and investors. So this is what we are working at now. We will make, for example, a test before invest task force within AI. This will then be in collaboration with Tjenester for Sensitive Data at the University of Oslo. They have a secure system for handling data and doing AI on this data. And this we will also, of course, use the premises and what Uninet Sigma 2 can offer to us. So this is kind of a test before invest task force with competence and with the whole ecosystem, so that you can have everything at one place, so to say, one-stop shop for this. We will be a distributed network in Norway. All the partners and NORA partners are also distributed in Norway, but we will have a prominent hub then at the D-Science Center, which is a new data science center at the University of Oslo. And this will also be then an important part of the Oslo Science City. So, to conclude, we now see that research results, they show they show that AI technology is quite mature. And Norwegian data is undoubtedly a potential gold mine. Norway, we have the expertise. We have the expertise needed to progress rapidly in deployment. We have really good research groups and spread all over Norway doing AI on health, medicine, healthcare data. So this is now we can also see that this has just started kind of diffusing into the industry and into patient care around the world. So it's still early, but all these kind of factors combined, and also combined with the health analysis platform, which is built now, I think makes Norway really interesting country to do this. So what we need is to kind of combine and make this ecosystem and combine forces. And this is what we are working on. So I think if we manage to do this correctly in Norway, I think Norway could become a European lighthouse within AI and health. And that was my take-home message. That also concludes the talk. I just also want to say that the coming Tuesday, next week, we will have a digital kickoff in NORA for what we call NORA Startup. So if you're more interested in innovation and AI, you could go into our web pages and sign up and register for the NORA Startup Kickoff Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Klas. It was a very interesting presentation. Now I would like to call all of the participants, and we had in average between 50 to 60 attendees, to use the Q&A box for potential questions that you might have regarding Klas's presentation. And then Klas will, of course, try to answer them as best as he can. So, are there any questions? If there are no, or if we're waiting for the questions, I can maybe ask Klas. So what do you think that the best thing is to do now in terms of getting this collaboration between academia and the private sector and the public sector working together? Do you think that the digital innovation hubs, as they are per today, do you think that they are basically the best way to connect all three sectors that we're mentioning?
Of course, there are many ways you could do this. But the point is that we have all the parts, but we need to structure them better. And of course, we have to build this health analysis platform in Norway. We have a lot of work to do, but we have this substantial parts. So getting kind of a plan to do this and make this ecosystem, I think this is crucial and very important and very exciting, because as I say, with the health data in Norway, they are quite exceptional. So we are actually in a quite good position in Norway to do this and to kind of make an impact in this field in Europe and in the world. So that's kind of my ambition and NORA's ambition to be part of this.
Yes, I think I fully agree with that. The second question for me is, since we are in these days when the yearly budget in Norway is supposed to be presented, right? So I would like just to check with you, what are your expectations in terms of like the funding directed, for example, to artificial intelligence, since we know we got this year national strategy on artificial intelligence in Norway, and there are several aspects there that need to be followed up, of course, with huge investments. So what would you like to see in this budget in terms of fulfilling all the goals that we have in the national strategy?
Yeah, of course, artificial intelligence is not only a kind of small step in the technology. This will kind of, we already has artificial intelligence all around us, so this is important. It's an important field of research, but also a field where we can actually deploy things. We could do innovation. We could actually position Norway to be, we could get quite a lot from investing in these times. But a big question in the budget, of course, is Digital Europe. It's a new European program. And also when I talk about Digital Innovation Hub, this is something we hopefully will then apply for within the Digital Europe program. So these plans is an example of things that can happen within Digital Europe, but that requires that this is no part of the budget. So that's an important thing, I think also.
Yes, perfect. Now we're getting some questions here in the box, so I will just try to start with them. We have one from Stefano Michele. He says, thanks for the great talk. You talked about the neuroscience AI virtual cycle. Then the talk was more focused on one part of the cycle, applying current AI methods to help and improve medicine. Could you say something about the other part of the cycle, use the worldwide Klas neuroscience community in Norway to improve AI, how to engage neuroscientists in Norway in AI? This could also be a gold mine. And thanks.
Yes, Stefano, very interesting. Yes, absolutely. From back in the 50s and until now, you find a huge inspiration from neuroscience in artificial intelligence. And this is kind of this inspiration is kind of influencing the field enormously. And in Norway, as you say, Stefano, we have great groups within neuroscience, a long tradition, both in Oslo, in Trondheim, in all the major universities. They have good groups in neuroscience. Many of them also have actually started using artificial intelligence, as you know. And I'm sure one aspect that I showed here, and that's kind of the sleep and the learning process. That's the learning process. How the brain learns is quite different from how artificial intelligence or deep neural networks learn artificially. So the kind of the back propagation algorithm is what kind of tunes the synapses in the deep neural networks. And this is not what happens in neuroscience. So I think, and that's also why I've been very interested in these sleep studies, where you have this replay phenomenon, another phenomenon for learning in the brain, because I think you could find quite an inspiration in the brain for making more efficient learning algorithms, because that's kind of the huge difference. A human being needs just a few examples to learn something, while you see that for image recognition or other types, you need enormous amounts of data to kind of learn. And I think that's the most exciting field, where we can draw a lot of inspiration from the brain and apply this to artificial neural networks.
Yes, thank you, Klas. So we have basically 3 questions that came simultaneously, so I'll just start selecting them. Some from Jon Becker. AI technology built on Norwegian data can be biased towards Norwegians and the Norwegian health system. Any strategy to deal with this when creating an export product?
Yeah, that's a good question. One advantage with the Norwegian health data compared to many other countries is that at least we have a public health system. So we have the health data, our health data is from at least the whole population. If you had done this in, for example, the US, you would have an even narrow part of the population, the kind of the population that have health insurance that is in one hospital or one county or whatever. So absolutely right. We have to mix our data to get the kind of wider database and different, I mean, also when it comes to genetics and everything, of course, we are quite homogeneous in Scandinavia. So that's a problem, that's a challenge, and that's the bias challenge is a challenge in AI in general, right? You see, this last week, I don't know if you saw the Twitter thing, that if you have two images in Twitter, it typically, and one is a black man and then another one is a white man, Twitter typically focus on the white man. So you have this bias in algorithms all over, and that's typically because you have trained the algorithm on a biased set of data. So yes, I'm sure I agree, and that's a challenge. We have to mix data and collaborate also with other nations and other databases around the world. That's the solution. But the take-home message is that I think in Norway also there is better than most other sources.
Thank you, Klas. The next question is from Christopher Eik. What are the legal and ethical problems that arise when developing AI for the health sector, and how do we solve them?
Yeah, that's worked at a lot now. So as I said, the first medical device in the US approved by the FDA was just back in 2018. So we have a lot of challengers there. One thing which is maybe not a challenge, but at least which is quite unfortunate in a sense, is that when you train your algorithm and wants to approve it, either through Legemiddelverket in Norway or NCE approving in Europe or FDA in US, you have to stop the learning process. So when you apply as a medical device, you have to fix your parameters so that this can kind of operate under these conditions. And it's important also because if you don't do this, you could, of course, the program could self-improve, which should be an advantage. But it could also lead to kind of mislearning. That kind of, it declines. And so we have a lot of new questions here. These are, I think, worked hard on right now throughout the world, how to solve this in the best possible way. For example, if you have one algorithm that is already approved and go through a new training cycle, improving the tool, should you then go through the whole cycle again to get it approved? That sounds like a bad idea, right? You should have a shorter turn the second time. So all these things are worked on, and that's interesting questions as well.
Thank you. We go further. Then a question from Rodika Mihai. Thank you for the good presentation, Klas. What do you think is the biggest hurdle in achieving more AI applications in health sector?
The biggest hurdle, I think you have shown a lot of good results in research. These research results, they are typically from one particular lab, one particular type of equipment, and so on. So when you want to kind of generalize things across labs, across hospitals, across different equipment, that's kind of a challenge, I think. And the way to solve it is, of course, to train broader, to train more on different systems and so on. But I think that's kind of the biggest hurdle, and also going through improvements, creating this ecosystem to test it out, that it works, and so on. And so we have a lot of things to solve, but I think the huge challenges is in making things work through kind of the different hospitals, different places, and so on. Yes,
and the last question currently. There's still time to ask questions for the audience. From Anna Ozaki, thanks for the talk. Could you please comment on concerns regarding adversarial attacks on medical machine learning? A Science article from 2019. That's the question.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it, but of course, yeah, things could be attacked, as you say. That's a challenge. This is not my field of specialty at all. I don't know, but typically, if you have a closed system, it should be quite easy, I guess, to avoid those attacks. So I need a following up question. I don't know exactly what this paper points out as challenges.
Okay, is there any more questions from the audience to Klas? Yes. From Harry Hallock, I agree that we have the data, the know-how, AI expertise, and the research showing AI effectiveness. It is unclear when EU will release their AI regulations, and ISO standards are still a while away. How do we deploy AI within healthcare now? Could assurance from independent third parties promote, fill in this current regulatory gap?
I think so, in many aspects, also in healthcare. It has been discussed also in Norway, the kind of certification or certification process. We could also discuss algoritmetilsyn, that like the Datatilsynet have a own tilsyn for algorithms, or it could be a part of Datatilsynet. But this especially also with respect to the previous question about bias. You need to have a system where the algorithms are tested in a good way. So I think quite often these algorithms are black boxes, then it's not easy to understand the algorithms themselves. So I don't think the algorithms, of course, they should also be open in a way when before it's an improvement. But the important thing is to test this properly and to have a system for testing. And this is what has been, is working. I mean, countries are working on this all over the world now. This is what FDA has done when they have started approving AI applications as medical devices, as diagnostic tools. But a proper testing, and yes, it could absolutely be interesting also to have independent third parties, as maybe not only in healthcare, but maybe especially outside healthcare, that you could have a kind of certification that kind of certifies as good as possible that your tool is, for example, not biased.
Thank you, Klas. Currently, we don't have any more questions. I'll just give 10-20 seconds more to the audience if they want to ask something more. And if not, then we will conclude the webinar for today. So, any more questions? I would say that was it, Klas, as far as I can see. No more questions coming up. I would like to thank you for your time today and the very nice presentation you prepared for us. And I would like to thank all of the participants for attending yet another informative NORA webinar, and that we will continue doing so on a permanent basis, of course. Yes, any last words, Klas?
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Ivan. It was a pleasure today.
Great. Thank you all, and see you soon.